Hello, and welcome to part 3 of my Return to Moons of Ardan video series. Um, and straight up, I do want to acknowledge that I did receive a copy of the game key from the game developers, so thank you to the devs. Um, I am going to review and make my comments fairly and honestly to the best of my ability, but I did want to acknowledge that I did receive a copy of the game for free. And I wanted to make this video, this third part, as a I guess more of a way to conclude this revisit look here, because at the end of the second video I was rather frustrated personally as a player, and my kind of opinions then kind of came out of the stream of consciousness, and I wanted to think about what I was experiencing and really get into what I had and what I was looking at and what I was feeling. Between the end of the last video and this video, I let it run for quite a while to lower down the amount of pollution on the planet, although it doesn't look like that. I think that may be because the game updated in between the version I was playing and this save, the reload of the save, and that might have caused all the buildings to have like all the pollution filtering on them without the planet actually being that polluted. The other thing I did in between is I expanded a little more on the second planet here, did a little bit more development, got the first medical center built, and got the first level access to the first level 3s here. And I just at this point I'm going to go ahead and instead of playing more, is just give my thoughts, because I spent about a hour going over them, writing down, and just going with what I thought. And I'm going to separate them into two categories, kind of my general thoughts and pollution specific, namely because the pollution was a recent update in February, and that means that it has the least amount of playtesting and balance possible because it's so new. So the first thing I just kind of want to get with and go is trade routes in this game are hard. I remember, comparing this to the Anno series, because this really feels, in just kind of its construction, close to the Anno series as a model. And Anno 1404, also known as Dawn of Discovery, you got your first 50 prestige. You went and you took that to the Grand Vizier. The Grand Vizier gave you a ship loaded up with goods, enough to start your next settlement, and then you could use that ship in a trade route between the two, no problems. This game, you get a launch catapult, you send off your first ship, you send it to the next planet, it drops off the goods, and then is stuck in orbit. Quite simply because you don't have a landing pad. And you won't have access to a landing pad for a long time. So suddenly you're left without a way, of even if you got a catapult here, of reusing the ship. I must have a dozen just capsules floating this planet with nothing more they can do. Okay. It makes setting up trade routes, which is like when you first get off planet and you start setting up a colony world and you get it a bit developed and you're like, all right, I want to start this trade route. And you're just like, nope, you're going to have to slog through it all. So I don't get access to that multi, location logistics aspect early in the game, which I feel is one of the good parts about the game, and I'm would like that to be a little earlier. Maybe some ideas I had is that the shuttle builder kind of has its own launcher in it to get up into space, and then the mission control center is fine, and then maybe on each, you build a space elevator kind of thing. So on the new planet, you don't need to build a new place to put ships into orbit, but you do need to build a space elevator. And if you do want them to build up more, it'd be interesting that instead of just shuttlecraft to bring things back and forth, you could also build a colony ship, and the colony ship would essentially when it arrives at a planet, it lands and deconstructs into 10 wood and 10 biofilaments to help you build, up. And maybe you send 2 or 3 colony ships to each planet you're colonizing. And then you don't do that again, but it's a great way to just get materials to that other location, um, other than a shuttle, to help you get that basic setup running. Life is good when you do that. Um, and I would enjoy that. And then maybe the ship is somewhat cheaper in materials, but again, you can only use it once. It's a colony ship; it's meant to go and then go away. Um, but if it's going to be this, then I would like a way for trading to just happen a little quicker, a little easier, and that may be impacted by pollution. Whereas if you didn't have pollution on, you would be able to do that quicker and easier. Um, so that may be again a solved by adjusting pollution, which I will get to later. Um, so the other thing I will say here is I really like being able to hover over and see what my max production per day is and what my current consumption per day. That's really useful, really helpful. Um, and it really only does that for the consumption items. But there's these other goods that you're using, and it'd be really helpful to know what your consumption of that is, um, based on what input buildings are doing. If you're able to calculate off the what the houses are consuming, you should also be able to calculate off what production buildings are consuming. And I realize that may be something in the works, but not there yet. But that would actually be really helpful to be able to see that, to know, okay, I need to build more of this, because sometimes the buildings aren't super distinct, and you have to go through, okay, which one is this doing, which one is this doing. And whereas if you could just go here, it's like, okay, I just need more of this. You don't need to go find the building to figure out how much you're using. You'll just have that. Sometimes it can be a bit annoying if you're trying to figure out, max versus actual production. Because when I first built this row of textiles and this clothing factory, I only had one line of textile, or 5 farms and 1 fabric weaver. That's only enough for 50% of the clothing factory. Now, I knew this, and that made it a very easy calculation for me to run. Um, but it could be very helpful if you have like an actual, or like a 10-day average of what you're doing, or a 20-day average. And that way you can kind of, see what your max production is and what your actual, or, someday average. That would be, again, another quality life improvement. It may be in the works. Some good things. The thing I got here is I didn't figure out until I got all the way to here, and the Synthwich factory, which relies on soil fields, which is exclusively this planet. You need that resource, soil flour. I didn't know I needed that as kind of the next level good I would need. I currently do not need, other than the chromium ore, which I needed for the hospital, and is also available here. I didn't know if I needed these two as my next thing, or the gas or the premium ore. It would have been nice to have, if the chromium ore had only been here, it would have indicated that I should have gone to that planet versus this planet. Or if, maybe when you level up and you get to your first level, whatever good, you get to make a choice. So let me come back here to where the only houses I have of that level are. Let's see here. Where is it? There we go. These guys. So obviously 8, 9, if you could figure out, you get to choose either Synthwich, or maybe there's a resource on this planet that they want, and you guys get to choose your development, and you could, and you could see what basic resource you need. So which, if you were opening up on your planet you have, or your planet you currently have, and maybe, you could have a fun achievement of, you choose a luxury resource on a planet you don't, already have, and that can be like the hard road, and it's a fun achievement you can get. But as a strategic player, that should be more obvious to me of which way I should go there, especially when setting up, getting trade routes are kind of difficult to operate. So instead, I find this and I want to start expanding and doing more with the level 3 population. I'm instantly blocked. And it's like, okay, now I need to go play another hour setting up another colony with all its basics to be able to um, then you know, have get the production I need to start sending this material and having this material available. So I'm slightly, just kind of that either should be indicated earlier so I know I'm going the hard road, or you could do things like perhaps removing the chromium ore here. So even though you could go here, you don't, when you finally get access to this, when you get access to space routes, the next thing you need is the medical center. It needs this, it needs chromium ore. Chromium ore isn't on this planet. So you're like, this is the planet I need to go to, and it's all set up. But if you want to have chromium ore on both, it's fine. Just maybe some better indications are an option later down the road. That could all be really cool. And then, so another thing that's in this game is you essentially have autocarchy of your empire. There's no third-party vendor who might sell you some more construction materials for some sort of cost. In the Anno games, you could generally, buy materials from a third-party vendor. It might be expensive, but it might be, you might have the income, and that's just the fastest way to develop, and you just do it so you can keep going and keep playing and keep building. And that's just kind of built into the game, and that's kind of nice. The other thing with this game is because storage is so tight to begin with, you start with like 5 storage and you got to kind of build, and you only add a little bit of storage each time, that you can't really build up a supply of building materials. I think you should just be able to have a bigger basic capacity, especially with this autocarchy thing. So as your materials build up, as you're managing one planet, you come back to the next, you have enough materials to actually do a production chain all at once, rather than I can do a partial production change and then have to wait. It's kind of dissatisfying with building materials. Being, storage of it's so limited that you can't do that. And no way to, get some supplemental if you're doing a particularly large project. So that was there. And if, the pollution blocks, you don't want to make infinite space for them to be stored, or a large space for them to be stored just because that's part of your pollution model, you can make a special pollution block storage that's, decently cheap to build. It only holds so many. And, you can just work that in there so it's not part of your normal storage capacity, or you can make pollution block capacity just more limited in the regular storages. I think that's a better way to do it. So then we get on to pollution. Pollution was, I think, the main source of my frustration, because the ability I was not able to get 2 worlds up and running, shooting shuttles back to each other, even if those shuttles couldn't be reused, was pollution was too punishing. It is a death spiral. The fact that I got Vela back from being deep in the red to here was a concerted effort and required me to just get to the point where it was trending in the right direction, to hit the fast button and let the game play for like 2-3 hours. That is just not enjoyable. If I had to spend 2-3 hours to just spend time on remedying it, because there is no way I could go further without reinstigating the death spiral, it was painful as a player. So kind of what I'm going to use as my benchmark here is the Anno 2070 series, which did also had a pollution factor in the game that they called eco balance. Um, and I'm going to do some comparisons to that. The 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 difference between the two models is this system uses a progression model where you have, you have your production of pollution and I guess what do they call it? Mitigation, dissipation. Um, your mitigation, and if you have more mitigation than pollution, you're trending towards the good side of the bar. More pollution than mitigation, you trend towards the bad side of the bar. And it doesn't matter how much, but if you leave the game on where everything else is balanced and you walk away, if it's bad, it will eventually become terrible. Everything will be thrown out of whack and you will death spiral. But it can take a while, and again, then it takes a while to remedy. In Anno 2070, they kind of had a flat system where certain buildings produced a certain amount. And once you built that building, it would make the change on the world, and it would make it in about 2 to 3 minutes. You remove that building, problem comes away in 2 to 3 minutes. Very, you can very much feel where it is. So that, kind of thing is the ability to, as a player, react and see a response and not have your time consumed with trying to deal with that response. It is a choice to be made. And I'm not saying a progression system cannot work, but it's going to need something to help put it in a better situation. So the first thing was there's not enough mitigation. The mitigation tool you have is these scrubbers, which are negative 400. Negative 400 is practically nothing in this game, considering that to get a working vehicle assembly and this, that, and the other, that's 600 plus plus extra pollution you're going to do on each launch. That's not counting the fact that these scrubbers consume a high-end material. They consume these nanofibers, which this factory generates 140 pollution. You need 150 pollution worth of metalloid extractors. You need of quarries, you need another probably 130, maybe a little less. And that's the metalloid, and this takes even more. This also takes, like getting one of these nanofiber factories up and running is like, around 800 pollution. You need 2 of these scrubbers to basically have the capacity to build 2 more scrubbers. So because this builds like up to 6, each of these takes, one per day, you're spending a third of your capacity to build nanofibers on scrubbing the damage from those nanofibers, or more. And then that's the ability to build more scrubbers. But by the time you built all that, you're going to have to build more population. Each population generates 2, and then they need consuming goods, which are going to generate more. So you are spending. It feels like you're spending about 50 to 60% of your nanofiber creation on the pollution mitigation and population and consumption buildings to support all that. That is so huge. I would quite literally make these pollution scrubbers do 1,000 because of how expensive they are. Maybe if they don't consume nanofibers and do something else. And then there's also the cost of that you need places to store pollution blocks, and you're not going to be able to get rid of them for a while. So these pollution scrubbers are so expensive, and essentially you're only 2. You do have trees that you can grow, but that is unless you cover the planet in trees, and you need people to do that, you're going to generate. The only way to grow trees is with these woodcutters huts. Um, it's a very slow, expensive, space consuming process and just not good enough. Um, so one of the ways to keep pollution as it is you need more mitigation tools. One thing that could be really cool is an idea of a recycler, and it could be a building with a range like the community center. You send some workers in, and all inhabitants in range of one of these don't produce the two pollution. So suddenly, you're dropping out pollution from your people. As you can see, the generation is not there, but it's another way to like mitigate it. So if like based on its size, if each one of them, dropped in the middle of a decently sized population center, could remove like 200 pollution, and it costs like one worker, and it wasn't like super expensive to maintain. It's not expensive to maintain; it's just a worker, maybe two. That becomes a lot more manageable. Is it gives you another tool. And then you could like maybe upgrade it later with like a secondhand store or a thrift shop, and that would essentially, reduce consumption even further of your people, and that could be really cool. Where you would strategically plan to build these recycling centers in the middle of your population centers. But just more ideas to deal with pollution. If you're going to make these, if you take out the cost of this nanofiber, they still take 10 population to operate because you still have that. That's pretty expensive too. But if you take out the cost of the nanofiber and they're just producing pollution cubes, maybe about maybe -600. But these pollution scrubbers need to be better. Right now, they're the only option, and they're not a great option. Then the other thing I will say is that the timing of pollution. You first get access to pollution before you get access to any mitigation tools. This is a problem. Like, you should like somewhere in here get access to the recycler or something. You want a mitigation tool enough that is credible before you start adding in these super pollution kind of things. Like this vehicle assembly thing, if you look at my current pollution generated from workplaces, it's about, it's a little over 1,300. And that's before I add in the 3 space building and launches. If I add in 3 space building and launches, I'm adding 50% more. I've basically gotten rid of my space capacity to be able to have a pollution dissipating society. Because if you can't really be generating here. You have to generally be negative. The only time you can be generating is like when you're building up a production chain and then you build in the pollution mitigation behind it. Because if you're not going negative, if you're not trending slightly negative, you are in a death spiral of some sort. And so again, yeah, something before space flight, a little more, make the space flight buildings not as bad. Just something. And then trying to gather my thoughts here. I wrote things down to help, but the other thing I was gonna kind of compare that with is with the Anno 2070 is, even though you have two different factions, both the tycoons that are more, do more pollution in general, their populations care less about it. So there's less negative effects for going further down. And with the ecos, their buildings produce less population to begin with. And early on, they both get pretty, efficient energy-wise buildings to deal with pollution. The ecos get this, wide area radius, weather scrubber kind of thing. And it's enough to manage your early pollution. It's not enough to get you in the major bonus areas, but it's enough to keep you from getting in the major negative areas. You may go a little negative, and you may have to, strategically cover your island in the corners in the middle to kind of mitigate your early pollution. But also, there's other islands in that game that you're just going to make into production islands and not colonies, and therefore, you know, it's not like I just, could go here, build a chromium mine, and ship it back, or just do the chromium production over there and have the pollution mitigation for that production chain. I had to build up a whole empire over here, or a whole part of my empire over here, and that required even more pollution mitigation. So it, that aspect of using a lot more islands let you spread out more, and pollution mitigate through just having different spaces in which to do different projects, which let you, again, spread out the pollution. If that's not going to be here, then pollution mitigation definitely needs to be thought of. Okay, you need to have better options for it so it's easier to control, because pollution is a neat mechanic if you have a fun way to be like, okay, this is kind of, I build this, as part of what I'm doing. Rather than like I'm playing pollution mitigation the game, which is what this game actually ended up feeling like. Because once you started realizing I need to build pollution mitigation to construct and build my pollution mitigation. And at that point, I was just like, that's just insane. I'm having to do all this just to mitigate pollution, just to keep playing the game, without things totally dying. And one thing I'll bring here on these here, this happiness meter and consumption meter, consumption goes up as pollution gets worse. Production goes down as pollution gets worse. So you get double squeezed. And you may not realize you're getting double squeezed until it's too late or almost too late. And it, again, because it's a slow progression, where things slowly start getting out of whack and you get to there and you just got to kind of flip your way back. And it's every building that gets impacted, even buildings that aren't relying on quality. Like, if I'm thinking about it, this chromium factory, it's not really relying on environmental quality. It's not growing things, but it's still also impacted. So, it just, your whole, it's one thing if the impacts are more limited and targeted and don't affect other productions. But once it, just basically takes your whole economy there, you just kind of have to be like, okay, how do I get out of this death spiral with the least amount of pain possible? And that is the problem. That is where pollution currently is. It is a death spiral that costs too much to avoid. So you're playing pollution mitigation the game and not getting to develop your empire and set up trade routes. I realized from regression at this point is I would need to set up basically do a whole nother pollution mitigation, build up the population to do it. And I was just like, I don't feel like doing that. That doesn't feel fun. I'm doing things I already can do to get to the next thing. It's not like I'm, working on unlocking the next thing. I'm worried about, getting myself set up so I don't death spiral when I try to do the next thing. And that's just not the feel I want for this game. Or a game like this. Now, this is still, in development. There is time to change things. I perfectly accept that, this could be unbalanced, just because pollution is so new. And I think there is, time to change things, and really time to, make this not pollution mitigation the game. And so part of why I was doing this third, kind of more review episode where I went through specific thoughts that I had planned out a little bit more, is I wanted to give the developer something, to work with, and kind of really give them my feedback as I was thinking about the game, because I want this game to be a success. I love these kinds of games. I love I loved Anno 1404 slash Dawn of Discovery. I loved Anno 2070. Those were, comfort games to me, just the logistics of it. And I would love you know, this kind of spacefaring version of, I are not version of it, but taking that concept and those core kind of multiple settlements that trade to benefit the whole system. Um, that kind of game and putting it in space across multiple worlds using these cute little axolotls instead of humans. I love all this. I want this game to succeed because I like this kind of game. And that's what this third video is about, trying to give the ideas, trying to really give my experience and give that honest feedback, so that there's really something for the developer to think about and work with on it, and possibly make some changes on that really make me want to continue and do the game. Just in its current state, it's pollution mitigation, the game, and it's not fun because there's not really interesting options to deal with pollution. It's one option and build it to just build what you have to build to support it. It's not interesting at this point. But there is time for that to change. So here is my best to the developer, my honest thoughts, so they can hopefully change it, make it better. Because I do want this game to succeed. So I want to thank you all for joining me back at this final episode that was more review and thoughts than anything else, and be seeing you.